Have you eaten an avocado? Have you eaten an avocado in the past 24 hours? Answer in the chat, yes or no. So I have some ripe, as people are answering, I have some ripe avocados in my kitchen. So I did eat an avocado today. I spread it on a bagel instead of hummus or peanut butter or whatever. I like to have it as an option. But again, this class isn't all about avocados. But since it's in the title, I thought I would ask. So far we're looking like 2 avocados consumed, I think, today. That is a healthy fat. We're going to talk about that later and what kind of fat that has in it. So, all right, thank you, Isabel. Let's go to the next thing. So I want to start by really acknowledging the fact that the news, and I say that in quotes because we have a lot of different news sources. We might be getting our news from a source that might not be very credible. But the news on fats can be confusing and has been for a while. I put that picture of Snackwell's. So Snackwell's snacks came out in the 1990s. And I'm just curious if you could type in the chat, yes or no, who remembers when Snackwell's first came out? Who remembers the fat-free craze? Yeah, just yes or no, if you remember Snackwell's. Joe, you're a no? I'm surprised. So Snackwell's came out in the 1990s, and there were cookies and there were crackers and there were all sorts of desserts that came in these bright green boxes. And what they were really pushing in the 90s was to eat a diet void of all fat. And we're going to talk about why that's not a good idea. But in the 1990s, that's what one of the diet fads was, to cut all fat from your diet. And we're going to talk about that being not really a great idea. So some of the confusing news has been that fat-free is always the best choice. Everything was fat-free in the 90s. There was fat-free yogurt. There even was fat-free cheese, and I don't know how they put that together. So sort of a diet myth. You've probably heard this one. Butter is better than margarine because margarine is a fake food. That one is, I see that all over. Margarine is not a fake food. It does have some chemicals in it, like many foods do, and we're going to talk about that. And then another one that's kind of popular right now is coconut oil will cure whatever ails you. So we're going to kind of bust some myths, and we're going to talk today about healthy fats versus fats that are less healthy, so you can leave with some ideas about how to get more healthy fats in your diet. All right, Isabel. So let's break it down. Oh yes, that's my hammer on the butter cube. Okay. All right, Isabel, next one. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about why we absolutely do need fat in our diet. So why the fat-free craze is not a good idea. Different types of fats and their effects on the heart and body. And then how to choose the tastiest and healthiest fats. So let's get going. So first things first, we need fat. Every single food guidance system in the world recommends that we eat fat every day. And if you've been to these classes before, you've heard me say the same thing about carbs, although people will argue with me all the time. But we need fat. The issue is some fats are healthier than others, and that's what we're going to break down today. All types of fat, good fats and less healthy fats, have roughly the same amount of calories per teaspoon. We're going to talk about that later on. So why do we need fat? Let's keep going. Well, let's start with this one. So knowing that we need fat, Isabel's going to pop up a poll with some percentages, and I'd like you to respond in the poll. What percent of your daily diet, according to the dietary guidelines for Americans, should come from fat? And when I say percent, it's percentage of the calories you consume. Percentage of the calories you consume. What percentage of your daily calories should come from fat? So take a minute, We'll let people weigh in on that. And then Isabel will show us where we are and we'll talk about the answer to that.
All right, it looks like 58% said 10 to 15, 5 to 10% said 21%, and 25 to 30% were 21%.
Okay, so you can see on your screen, most people voted for 10 to 15%, a few 5 to 10. Nobody said 40 to 50. So the correct answer is 25 to 30%. That's surprising to a lot of people.
I was going to put that, but then I switched.
You were, Robin? Okay, good. It's surprising, but part of the reason is because, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, fat is calorie dense. So it's easy to get to that 25 to 35%. It's not as calorie dense as protein. It's not as calorie dense as carbohydrate. And so we can get to that 25 to 30, it's 25 to 35, depends on the source you look at. We can get to that fairly quickly. So point here is we need fat. All right, Isabel, next one. So why do we need it? We need fat to help us absorb important vitamins. If you have zero fat in your diet, you cannot absorb vitamins A, D, E, and K. Those vitamins travel in fat and they are absorbed in your stomach via fat. So if you have no fat, you can't absorb those really, really important vitamins. So we need fat to help us absorb vitamins. Fat helps keep us feeling full and satisfied. We need that. If we have zero fat in our diet, we're going to be running to the cupboard every hour because protein and carbohydrates are digested much more quickly than fat. So fats help us feel full. They help us feel satisfied. So getting to that 25 to 30, 35% is important. Another thing fat does is to help balance your blood sugar. When we eat fat, so say I'm eating a peanut butter sandwich, that peanut butter is a healthy fat and it's going to slow down the absorption of glucose into my bloodstream. So especially if I'm a diabetic, I want to make sure if I have diabetes that I am balancing my meals so I have some protein and some carbs and some fat to slow down the release of all that carbohydrate and glucose into my blood. So it's really important to have fats and honestly a little bit at every meal. Last is they provide the body with energy and calories. If I just eat carbs, it's hard to get to the calorie levels I need in a day. If I just eat protein, it's also difficult. So bottom line is we need fats, but which ones? All right, Isabel. So how much fat? I don't expect people to remember these numbers because it really depends on how many calories you need in a day. Some people need 2,000. Some people on this class might need 1,800. Somebody on this class might need 3,000. But this 60 to 70 grams is what you see on a food label. So the food label, the fat grams on a food label and the percentages are based on a 2,000 calorie a day diet. So if you need less than 2,000 calories a day, you need less than 60 grams of fat a day. Now, the really important one to remember is it's recommended in the dietary guidelines that we stay under 20 grams of saturated fat per day. And we're going to break that down because I know numbers don't mean a lot to people. But to keep that number in mind as you're looking at foods and food labels, because if I pick up a food and I see that it has 9 grams of saturated fat, I'm going to know that's about half of what I should have in a day. So that 20 number is an important number to keep in mind. And last, when we're talking about numbers, the less than 20 is part of the 60. We don't need 60 grams of fat plus an additional 20 of unsaturated fat. We need 60 grams total, and up to 20 can come from saturated fat. But once we get above that, our balance of good fats and less healthy fats is not very good. And that's what we're going to break down. So let me stop for a minute, go back to that for a second, those numbers. Does anybody have any questions about these numbers that they want to either unmute and ask or type into the chat? Any questions about this? I see Isabel said she eats peanut butter just about every day. That's from the other slide. I do too, Isabel. It's an unsaturated fat. Well, if you have a question, feel free to unmute or type in the chat. Isabel's watching, and Isabel, shout them out if you see any. We'll keep going. Okay, so when I talk about getting to 60 grams of fat, it's not that difficult. So sometimes people hear numbers and they say 60, wow, like that must be like a lot of fat. How would I ever get up to 60? Here's a sort of a day in the life of healthy fat. So if I put just a little sprinkle of flaxseed on top of my smoothie or yogurt in the morning, a few small handfuls of nuts as a snack, and I do mean small, I mean like a small cupped hand, 2 or 3 spoons of an olive oil based dressing. So when I say spoons, it's really teaspoons on a salad with lunch, or a half of an avocado, and then a few ounces of fish in the evening. It's really easy to get to your 60. The point is, it's very easy to get to your 60 grams of fat. And this is an example of how to do it in a healthy way. All of the things on this list are healthy fats, and we're going to go into detail. We've got flax and chia seeds, both have healthy fat. Nuts, very healthy fat. Olive oil, healthy fat. Avocado, healthy fat. Fish, healthy fat. All of these are a day's worth of healthy fat that add up to about 60 grams. All right, keep going. Now here comes the tough part. And I know you've all heard this before and seen this before. And sometimes it gets really confusing. So the fats that we want to eat less of are the fats that are solid at room temperature. Those are saturated fats. Those fats are the fats that we want to stay under 20 grams a day because they can cause heart disease. So that would be the fats that we find in animal products like butter, lard. People used to cook with lard. I know my mom always made her pie crust with lard, nothing else. Full fat, whole milk and whole fat yogurt, cheese, high fat meats. On a picture earlier, there was some roast beef on there with a lot of marbling, a lot of fat in it. The skin on chicken or turkey or chicken wings. And we find saturated fat in tropical oils such as palm or coconut. So you don't have to memorize the list. Think to yourself, is it hard at room temperature? If it's hard at room temperature, it's got some saturated fat in it. Now we're going to talk about margarine in a minute because that's a little bit different. So if it's solid at room temperature, it's a saturated fat. All of these things are solid at room temperature unless you live in New Orleans or Arizona in the summer or New Mexico where everything melts. It's going to be solid at room temperature. That's a really easy way to recognize a saturated fat. Unsaturated fats are the opposite. They tend to be liquid at room temperature. That's going to be your vegetable oils. That's going to be your nut oils. Because if we take peanuts and we smash them, we end up with oil, which is part of peanut butter. So even though you don't think of nuts as being liquid, the fat inside of nuts is liquid. Think about if you ever buy natural peanut butter. Natural peanut butter has oil on the top. It is not solid. It is liquid at room temperature. So unsaturated fats, liquid at room temperature. Even the fat we find in fish is unsaturated. There's where it might get a little confusing because we've got, if I take a piece of salmon and I line it up next to a pork chop, it's a similar texture, but the fat in the salmon is unsaturated and it is a healthy fat. It's more of a liquid fat. So if you forget everything on this slide, go back to, is it liquid or solid at room temperature? If it's liquid, it's an unsaturated fat, it's a healthy fat, we should eat more of them. If it's solid, it's a saturated fat and we should eat less of that. So any questions about this slide? Got a quiet group today. While you're thinking of your questions, the graph on the right is from the dietary, it's on my right, it's from the dietary guidelines. And it basically shows us where are we getting our saturated fat. Sharon, I'll answer your question that's in the chat in a minute. So where are we getting our saturated fat? And so Isabel, this is small on my screen, but if I remember this right, doesn't it say sandwiches? Sandwiches. So we're getting most of our saturated fat in lunch meat and cheese. That's where Americans are getting a lot of their saturated fat. You can see the percentages for all these other things as well. I just thought that was interesting. Now, Sharon said coconut oil is not healthy then. That surprises me. So at the beginning, Sharon, I had that slide that said coconut oil will cure whatever ails you. There's a lot of articles about coconut oil being a great antiseptic and putting it on cuts and using it to soften your skin. And there's nothing wrong with cooking with a little bit of coconut oil like you would with a little bit of butter. It's that your 60 grams should not include a high percentage of coconut oil. It is solid at room temperature. It is saturated. I have it in my cupboard. I love the taste of it, but I only use maybe, 1 or 2 teaspoons if I'm, if I feel like I want that flavor in maybe a vegetable stir fry or something like that. So coconut oil is saturated. Unfortunately, it's still in the category of saturated, just like butter. But I'm not saying don't ever use it, but it is saturated. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so let's talk about the unsaturated fats. Now when people start going down the path of defining all these large words, I think this can sometimes get boring, but here's what you need to know on this slide. Remember, if it's liquid at room temperature, it's a healthy fat. Now, all foods that contain fat usually have a combination of monounsaturated and polyunsaturated and omega-3 fats. All these big words on this slide, the monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, omega-3 fats, they're all unsaturated fats. They're all fats that are good for you. They're the healthy fats that we're trying to focus in on. Just remember that most foods have a little bit of both. It's the ratio. Beef also has unsaturated fat, but not very much. It has mostly saturated. Olive oil has some saturated fat in it, but it's mostly unsaturated. So don't get worried about balancing and do I have polyunsaturated? Do I have monounsaturated? Do I have omega-3s? Look at all the foods on this list and think, how can I get more of these in my diet? Because they are all sources of unsaturated fat. So I hope that waylaid any fears or nervousness about these big terms. Just go back to, is it liquid at room temperature? Here's my list. All of these things are good sources. Nuts, liquid vegetable oils, olives and olive oil, fish, all of those, seeds, all of those are healthy fats. All right, Isabel. Keep going. Next one.
We do have a question. Sorry, I was clicking my space bar and accidentally moved ahead of the slides. So someone is asking, is there a handout we'll get so we have these lists of food?
So yes. So Isabel and I just started doing an overview, like a one-pager of key points from all of these PowerPoints, which these presentations are done in PowerPoint, which is a program that's not very easy to share. The files are giant. And so we started doing a one-pager that captures all of the smaller details that are on these. And so we will put that together after this presentation. We will email it out to people, but it takes us about a week to put that together. So we'll email it to this list in about a week. So yes, thank you. Yeah, thanks. All right, next one, Isabel. So what oils should I cook with? Again, liquid oils are oils that are unsaturated. So cook more with liquid oils. You can see here we're talking about temperature. Some oils that are good for cooking at high and low temps are extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, grapeseed oil, coconut oil, again, saturated, so use a little, rice bran and sesame oils. When I say sesame, I'm not talking about toasted dark sesame oil because that smokes very quickly. I'm talking about refined sesame oil. It's clear when you buy it. It's an unsaturated fat. Don't confuse it with the dark toasted sesame oil that has fabulous flavor that you have to keep in your refrigerator. That's not good to cook at high temperatures. So oil's not good for cooking. Almond, flax, pumpkin, safflower, and sunflower oils break down more quickly. And when they break down, they can create something in your body called free radicals, which we don't really want to have a lot of those floating around. They can lead to inflammation. So we want to like look at these oils on this list and choose those that are very good for cooking at higher temperatures. All right, so now that we know that unsaturated healthy fats are mostly liquid at room temperature, and that less healthy, Sharon, I'll answer your question in 1 second, and that less healthy saturated fats are mostly solid at room temperature. Let's see if we can take this poll. The question is, which of these foods contain mostly healthy unsaturated fats? We'll wait for Isabel to weigh in here, show us our results. And while we're waiting and people are guessing, Sharon has a question in the chat. How about vegetable oil? Vegetable oils are most often a combination of soy oil, canola oil, could be a little corn oil in there. They're made specifically not to smoke at a high temperature. A vegetable combo oil would be a good oil to saute in, a good oil to use in a muffin batter. So yes, vegetable oils, liquid at room temperature are fine. Good. So, all right. So you can see that 78% of people answered that nuts contain mostly unsaturated fat. So yay, everybody's doing fabulous. Yes, that is 100% correct. Remember I said at the beginning, unsaturated fats, they're liquid at room temperature. Nuts are confusing because nuts are hard when you eat them, but the fat inside is liquid. Think about the fat that floats on top of a jar of natural peanut butter. That's liquid. Unfortunately, cheese, a couple people chose cheese. So I'm a cheese lover. So this is unfortunate because cheese has a lot of saturated fat. Do I eat cheese? Yes. Do I recommend that you eat cheese? Yes, if you like cheese. Should you eat cheese at every single meal? No. It's very high in the artery clogging saturated fat. So cheese may be like a once a day, staying under your 20 grams of saturated fat. I do love cheese. For whoever voted for cheese, I get it. Somebody's asking, what are the healthiest nuts to munch on? All nuts are good choices. And nuts and seeds have different types of unsaturated fats. Some are polyunsaturated, some are monounsaturated. They have different omega-3 fats in them, some of them. They're all good choices. Walnuts are probably at the top, have some of the most healthy fat in them. Almonds are also high in good fat and high in calcium. Seeds like pumpkin seeds are good choices. Chia seeds, flax if we grind it, because we can't digest a whole flax seed, it just comes out. So all nuts are good, but when you're picking nuts, think about not always choosing those that are salted, because we'll get a lot of extra salt when we choose salted nuts. So if you like raw nuts, that's going to be the healthiest choice. If you prefer to have your nuts roasted, I'd suggest trying to buy them sometime that are low sodium or unsalted. All right, let's keep going, Isabel. So this is a little bit tricky, and I want to make sure everybody understands that. So type in the chat if you have ever heard of trans fat. It's the red phrase there under the second bullet. Trans fat. Have you ever heard of it? People are saying yes, yes, yes. Okay, good. A lot of sharp people in the room today. So here's what's really confusing. In 2018, the FDA banned trans fats because it was discovered that trans fats raise your LDL. That's what they call your bad cholesterol, low density lipoproteins, raise your LDL and raise your triglycerides and can contribute to heart disease. So FDA says you got to get the trans fat out of all food. And you can see, I say after that, yet, ... If you see the word partially hydrogenated on a food label, that is a trans fat. So how can they do that? So the question is, how can it be that they're banned and we still see them in coffee cream, we see them in some kind of nut butters, we see them in a lot of baked goods? The reason is if there's less than a half a gram per serving, food manufacturers can still use them. So taking all these big words aside, what I want you to do is think about it and look at food labels. And if you see these words, partially hydrogenated, it could be vegetable oil, it could be soy oil, it could be any kind of oil, pick something else because those half grams can add up and they contribute to heart disease. So here's an example of where they might add up. Coffee cream. So if you look at your coffee cream and it says partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, then you look and it says trans fat 0. Notice in the yellow here, this says trans fat 0. That means they can have less than a half a gram per serving. But if you love coffee and you love coffee cream, you're going to have more than one serving and you're going to have it every single day and it's going to add up. And that is a fat that we really should avoid. So take home message here is read food labels. If something's got a fat or oil on it, look for partially hydrogenated vegetable oil. That is a trans fat. That's what we want to steer clear of. Any questions about that? Because you're going to find them in bakery foods, sometimes coffee cream, sometimes fast foods. Any questions about trans fat? All right, we'll keep going. Before we wait, go back for a second. I want to address something. I want to make sure people understand the words you're looking for are partially hydrogenated. If it says hydrogenated, which is what it says on most peanut butters, that is not a trans fat. It's the word partially. It seems like it would be opposite. It would seem like partially is better than fully hydrogenated, but it's not true. When things are partially hydrogenated, they're less stable, they contain trans fats, and they're more likely to stick in our arteries and raise our risk for heart disease. All right, Isabel, thank you. So now move to butter or margarine. What do you like to use on toast? If you eat toast, do you use butter, margarine, or something else? Type in the chat. I see a lot of butters. I see avocado. I see peanut butter or avocado, something else or margarine. Okay, so we all like different things on our toast. So remember I said at the beginning, a little bit of butter is okay. If you love butter on your toast, you don't need to give it up. Just know that a teaspoon of butter, 1 teaspoon, has about 5 grams of saturated fat. Our number that we wanted to stay under for the day was 20 of saturated fat. So let's think about that. If I have 2 pieces of toast and I spread on 2 teaspoons of butter, I'm now up to 10 of my 20 grams of saturated fat. Then I want to have a pork chop for dinner. And I might get to my 20 real quick. So just balance. So balance. If you love butter, it's fine. Don't use it every day or use less, or just limit the other saturated fats that you're eating. So butter is an okay choice in small amounts. Avocado, great choice. Peanut butter, great choice. Those are both healthy, unsaturated fats. Margarine, the more solid margarine is, so as it moves toward a hard stick, it becomes a little more saturated. So if you buy soft tub margarine, like a Country Crock, or somebody wrote in here, I think Smart Balance, those are good choices. They're soft when you spread them. Those are very good choices, and they're made with plant-based unsaturated fats. So butter, margarine, move toward more plant-based. If you do use butter, small amounts for best health. All right, Isabel. So I wonder, I always put this when we talk about butter and margarine, I'm always trying to turn people onto this product. So my guess is there are some people in this class that have high cholesterol. And I want to make sure that people know that there is a product out there that is a spread that can help lower your cholesterol. So you get a good tasting spread on your toast, and you get something that helps lower cholesterol. And here's an example. There are a few on there, and I think Smart Balance might even be one, but I'd have to look it up. What you want to look for is, you can see on the food label, I think, this is hard for me to see. Does it say in the corner plant sterols or plant stanols? Isabel?
Yes, it says
yes.
plant stanols.
Okay.
Yep.
So Benecol, it's expensive. I'm not going to say that it is not, but using a little bit of Benecol on your toast is a great way to lower your cholesterol. It's made with unsaturated fat. It has plant stanols in it, sometimes called plant sterols, which can help lower your cholesterol. So lots of reasons to look for a spread that you might like better than butter. I'm not saying don't use any butter. I'm just saying limit. Last bullet, limit the amount of butter and margarine you use. Now, somebody wrote in the chat, what do we need to watch for in plant-based margarine? I keep hearing we should be careful with even plant-based margarine. I don't know who that person is, but I would like to know a little bit more about what you're hearing you should watch for. If you can type it in the chat, and I'll talk a little bit while you're thinking on that. So plant-based margarine, I would say, flip the label over, look for the least grams of saturated fat, because it can vary. Joe, I'll answer your question in a second. So back to the margarine, you're gonna flip the label over. You're gonna say, how much saturated fat is in this margarine? Because it varies. Some margarine is higher in saturated fat. So look for the lowest amount of saturated fat. You're going to find that in sprays and spreads. The harder the product gets, usually the amount of saturated fat increases. If you are allergic to artificial colors, you would look for something like that as well. Fewer ingredients on the list means usually a less processed food, but when it comes to margarine, there's a lot of ingredients on the list. So I would say look for softness, look for less saturated fat. Also look at sodium. Some of them are salted. So you wanna do no sodium or low sodium. Somebody asked, how does Benecol compare? I think it compares. It does not compare to butter, Joe. You're asking, does it compare to butter? No. Does it compare to margarine? Yeah, pretty good. Yeah. So I think it's very hard to replace the taste of butter. It just tastes good, you know? So it compares to a margarine, maybe like I can't believe it's not butter, but not true butter. And then somebody asked, where can Benecol be purchased? Yes, you can purchase it at Meijer. Yes. All right, let's keep going. Oh, so I'd like to know, would you try it? Would anybody try it? Yes or no? I'm going to tell you it's about $5 a container. So it's an investment. Yeah, I see some yeses. It's worth a try. And you know, if you can fit it in your food budget, and if you think of it as almost a medication, like something that can help lower your cholesterol if you have high cholesterol and lower your LDL, then the $5 seems doable. So, all right, good. Would you cook with it? No, you would not cook with it. It will break down to water, just like the margarines that are lower calorie. It breaks down to more of a wet. I mean, you could, but I wouldn't. All right, can you melt it and put it on popcorn? Never tried, Shelly. You tell me. You tell me how it comes out. I'm guessing when you melt it, it's going to separate into unsaturated oils and a little bit of water, but you could, and I don't know how that would go on your popcorn, but you could try it. Somebody wrote, I use Smart Balance or Earth Balance, and you answered my questions on plant margarines. Thanks. Yes, I love Earth Balance. I think it's really good. I can't remember if it has plant sterols or plant stanols in it, but it is a good choice. It's very low in saturated fat, if not totally void of saturated fat. It might have like 1 gram. So those are very good choices. Thanks for asking. All right, let's move on.
And then really quick, somebody said, how about the butter blends that have canola added?
Yes, canola is often used in the butter blends, and canola oil, even though it is a genetically modified oil, most oils that are in the grocery store today are GMO or genetically modified, but it is an unsaturated fat. So canola oil-based margarine is a good choice. All right, so quickly, I'm not going to read all these bullet points to you, but I'm going to pull some out. Ways to cut back on saturated fat. So remember, saturated fat's clogging up our arteries. So we want to limit our desserts and baked goods and look for that partially hydrogenated fat if we're buying them already packaged. I talked about cheese. Sadly, I'm a cheese lover, but most cheese contains quite a bit of saturated fat. So curbing your cheese is a way to cut back on saturated fat. We get a lot of fat from lunch meats and cured meat, sausages, hot dogs, bacon, ribs, all high in saturated fat. Sometimes French fries are fried in a combination of oils that include saturated fat, so we want to be careful about that. Ground beef, and you always want to choose the leanest. Any kind of chicken or turkey, remove the skin. And whole milk and full fat dairy foods are higher in saturated fat. So I want to talk about that one for a second, because a lot of time there is some benefit to eating whole milk and full fat dairy foods. It will help us carry those nutrients that we talked about on the third slide, A, D, K, and E. It will also help us feel satisfied longer. But when we drink whole milk, and when we eat whole fat yogurt, we are getting anywhere between 5 to 9 grams of saturated fat of our 20 that we need to stay at in a day. So use sparingly. If you love whole milk and whole yogurt, use sparingly. Somebody wrote, I can't eat dairy, so I can't believe it's butter vegan. Is that a good one? Yes, that is a good one. Yes. And then somebody wrote, how effective is removing the fried chicken skin before eating? Pretty effective, Joe. Pretty effective, because a lot of the oil is in the skin to begin with. And when we're removing that crispy coating, we're removing a lot of the fat that was absorbed by the breading. It will take it down quite a bit. All right. So you saw on that last slide, an air fryer. I'm just curious, has anybody ever used an air fryer? And what did you make? So tell me yes or no. And if it's a yes, what do you use your air fryer for? I see. Okay. Okay, I see lots of air fryer lovers. So Isabel and I just got an air fryer because we're going to be teaching an air fryer class. So watch for that one. I've been playing around with it at home. It does do a really good job on chicken and fish. And if you buy like a packaged French fry that you would maybe normally put in oil, you can put it in your air fryer and get it really crisp. So air frying is one way to reduce the amount of fat that you're taking in. Now, most of us don't fry with saturated fats, but if you do fry at home, you are frying in oil. And even if it is vegetable oil, it's a lot of extra calories. So what the air fryer does is cuts the calories in your fish and cuts the calories in your chicken and still gives you a nice crispy product. So I love all the suggestions. I see a lot of fries, some fish, some chicken, all of that in the chat. really good ideas. Let me see, I saw something else.
Yeah, there was a question. It says, can you briefly talk about these fats and a low carb diet? I'm afraid I'm eating many of these high saturated fats in my low carb diet.
Yeah, I can. Let's hold that to the end because I will touch on that. Thank you. I'm not sure what your first name is, but I see Strong. So I will go back to that. Isabel, remind me to go back to that. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so I talked about dairy foods. Which dairy food do you think is the lowest in saturated fat? Saturated fat, the kind that clogs our arteries. Which one do you think is the lowest? And we'll let Isabel rack up our results. Good, good. Smart group. Yes. It is the 0% fat Greek yogurt. Even if it was 0% fat non-Greek yogurt, it would still be the lowest in saturated fat. The key is it's 0% fat. Whole milk and cheddar cheese, those two servings are very close. The cheese edges out the whole milk by like about 1 gram. So an ounce of cheddar cheese, depending on the brand, can be 8 or 9 grams, and whole milk is usually 8 grams, but they're very similar. So if you love cheese, if you love whole milk, again, recommendation is stay under 20 grams of saturated fat. Just pay attention for best heart health. Cottage cheese is in between there. It's between the Greek yogurt and then the milk and the cheddar cheese. So great, great, really smart group, very good. All right, let's keep going, Isabel. Okay, I'm going to touch on this quick because we're at 9:45 because I want to get into ways to incorporate more healthy fat into your diet. Cholesterol is confusing, right? Because we talk about saturated fat, talk about unsaturated fat, and here's something else, cholesterol. So here's something you should know. Your body does need some cholesterol. However, your liver makes it on its own. So if you walk out here today and you never put a food in your mouth that contains any cholesterol, so no eggs, no cheese, no meat, your liver is still going to make what you need to keep your brain functioning. It's part of different connective tissue in the body. So your body's going to make it anyway. And know that cholesterol only is in animal-based foods. You cannot get cholesterol out of a plant. It doesn't exist. So if it's an animal-based food, that would be dairy products, that would be meat, that would be anything that had those either dairy or meat in it, it's going to have some cholesterol. If it's the oiliest, fattiest peanut butter, which I love, that doesn't have any cholesterol. It comes from a plant. So what's important about cholesterol is to know that when we eat a lot of it, like in this picture, it can deposit on our arteries. So you can see that little ball. That little ball is called a lipoprotein, and cholesterol is the yellow part. And it travels in our blood in these little balls. It looks like a ball, so that's what I call it. But then when it scoots around in the artery, see how those little yellow shavings, they stick to the sides of the artery. So in that blown up picture, you can see one little piece of cholesterol. So after years of eating too much cholesterol, our arteries can get more narrow and more narrow. So we also know though that whether or not you have high cholesterol, a lot of that is genetic. Some people naturally have very high cholesterol and there is nothing you can do about it. You might be a vegan, you might be exercising like crazy, which also helps to lower your cholesterol and raise your good cholesterol. Sometimes we just get high cholesterol. But when it comes to foods, you want to limit the animal-based products to keep your cholesterol in check. All right, so I told you that cholesterol only came from animal products. So which food on this list contains cholesterol? see what we got. Okay. So yes, most of you answered ground turkey. That's correct, because we cannot get cholesterol out of plant-based foods. So soy milk, cashews, olive oil, they don't have any cholesterol. Are they fat? Do they have fat? Yeah, olive oil is all fat. Cashews are high fat. Soy milk has fat, but it doesn't contain cholesterol. So good job on that. Let's keep going. We've got 10 minutes. Do all fats have the same calories? Yes, they do. So whether you are eating butter or margarine or olive oil or canola oil or lard, it's all the same when it comes to calories. It's not the same when it comes to nutrition. Plant-based, liquid, healthy fats are much better for us. Calorie-wise, they're all the same. If you want to put a teaspoon of butter on your toast, same calories as a teaspoon of margarine, unless you're buying a lower calorie version of margarine. But teaspoon for teaspoon, they're the same. All right, Isabel, let's keep going. All right, so ways to eat more healthy fat. So we've got a couple things to cover in our last 5 minutes. How many, do I have like one more slide after this, Isabel? Yeah, okay, perfect. So what I'd like you to do is really think about these foods that have healthy fats in them. Let's talk about them for a minute, and how you could incorporate more of these into your diet to get that ratio of unsaturated fat to saturated fat higher. So a couple of ideas here, maybe some of them resonate with you. Stirring chia seeds into oatmeal or yogurt, or making chia pudding. Chia seeds have healthy unsaturated fat in them. If you've never bought them before, they're crunchy. They also have a little bit of iron, and they're good sources of healthy fats. Add walnuts or other nuts you like to breakfast cookies, quick breads, pancakes, parfaits. Message there is to eat more nuts. Add ground flax to baked goods, pancakes, or I'll add smoothies. So if anybody on here is vegetarian, flaxseed is a good way to get omega-3 fats that are in fish. So if you really don't like fish or you're vegetarian, you can still get those heart-healthy omega-3 fats in flax and flaxseed oil. So if you're vegetarian, if you don't like fish, pick up a bag of ground flax. Needs to be ground because whole flaxseed we don't digest, and add it to a few things here and there. Sauteing in vegetable oils, in particular, extra virgin olive oil instead of butter. Making your own salad dressings with healthy oils can decrease the amount of sodium that you're consuming. Eating any kind of nut butter and fruit as a snack. Making a peanut sauce for some vegetable stir fry is a good idea with some peanut butter. You could try a plant-based yogurt or a lower fat dairy-based yogurt to decrease your saturated fat and increase your heart-healthy fats. We talked about avocados. I have avocados behind me. Avocados are a great source of monounsaturated fat, vitamins, and fiber. So adding avocados to tacos or smoothies. Making your own hummus with olive oil. Eating more fish. Dietary guidelines recommends that we eat fish at least twice a week. So type in the chat, yes or no. Are you eating fish twice a week? Yes or no? I'm seeing a lot of no's. So then I see a couple of questions that we'll get to here in a minute. So strive for fish twice a week. If you don't like fish, don't sweat it. Eat some of the other healthy oils. But if you do like fish, strive to incorporate more salmon or tuna or fish that's baked or broiled into your diet. Depends on the week, somebody said. Barbara says yes. Is tuna considered a fish? Yes, tuna is considered a fish for sure. Yes. Eat fewer processed foods. When we do that, we naturally eat less saturated fat and more healthy fat. Or make your own trail mix with fruit and nuts, which are loaded with healthy unsaturated fats. So those are just some ideas. Again, I told you that we would send out a a summary sheet. And I'm actually on vacation next week, so I'll try to get that out this week. But we will send to everybody that signed up for this class a summary sheet that has these ideas on it. We've got 5 minutes left, and I want to address a couple of questions in the chat. Isabel, can you flip to the next slide? So we talked about why we need some fat in our diet. We know we need it to be satisfied. We know we need it to move around fat soluble vitamins. We know we need it to feel full. We know that all fats are not equal. Unsaturated plant-based fats are healthier for the heart and body. And at the end, I gave you some ideas for how to use the tastiest, healthiest fats. Now let's go back to the few. Before we do this, I want to answer the few questions in the chat. 2 questions I saw. Somebody asked about the Chobani Zero Sugar yogurt, I think. Let me see. Chobani Zero Sugar, yes, that's fine. The Chobani Zero, I think, is 0 saturated fat and 0 sugar. It does have an artificial sweetener in it. I think it has Splenda in it, but it could be monk fruit, it could be stevia. I'd have to look. It definitely is sweetened with either an artificial sweetener or a natural sweetener that is low calorie, which would be stevia or monk fruit. I'd have to look at it, but that's a good choice, especially if you have diabetes or you're trying to control your blood sugar. Somebody else asked about carbs, and they said they were on a low carb diet. And because they're on a low carb diet, they're eating a lot of saturated fat. And we can't get into details about this today because we don't have time, but I will say to that person, nowhere in the world is a low carb, high fat diet recommended. Now, I know about keto. It's been popular for the past 5-10 years. Again, these fad diets cycle, but in every country in the world, no one recommends that you increase your saturated fat intake and you decrease your carbohydrates. When you decrease carbohydrates, you're decreasing whole grains, you're decreasing healthy fruits like berries and banana and juices. So I would say to that person, watch it, because consuming from this presentation, 20 or fewer grams of saturated fat per day. If you're eating 0 carbs, it's really hard to meet your calorie needs with just fat and protein. Now that a lot of times that's the point. People are trying to not meet their calorie needs because they're trying to lose weight. But do you want to sacrifice your heart to lose 10 pounds? So I do not recommend a high saturated fat diet ever, or a low carb diet. That's just my opinion on that. And I do want to emphasize that you won't find that recommendation anywhere in the world either. You'll find it on the internet, but you won't find it from a reputable source. All right, so last thing is, if people would type in the chat, the next slide is asking people, based on what we talked about today, what is something you'll do? What is one goal you will set for yourself to choose or use healthier fats based on what you learned today? Did anything catch your eye that you thought, I'm going to try this? Maybe I'm going to try the Benecol. Maybe I'm going to snack on some nuts. Maybe I'm going to skin my chicken wings. Maybe I'm going to make my own salad dressing. Maybe I'm going to buy a bag of ground flax and keep it in my refrigerator and add it to my smoothies. So what kind of things, type in the chat, will you do based on what you learned today?
And then Chris, I did get a question. It says, do you happen to know if flaxseed is okay if taking an anti-estrogen like tamoxifen?
Tamoxifen?
Yes.
I do not know that. I think it is, because, okay, I don't know. I have to say I don't know. I'd have to look that up. With tamoxifen, I'm not sure. I know that there are some other food products that you avoid. So I would say ask your medical provider on that one. I'm not sure. I don't know that they have estrogens that flax has estrogens in it, but I do not know for sure. And then I do see in here, I see lots of good ideas in the chat, actually, of things people are going to do. Reduce the amount of dairy, try ground flax, try the Benecol, Eat less lunch meat. That's a tough one for my husband. Eat more fish and try a plant-based margarine. So lots of good ideas. So thank you for attending today's class. I hope you take away something. I want to remind people that we'll be sending out a summary with some tips. It won't be everything in this presentation, but it will be some summary tips on what we talked about. And to always check bronsonhealth.com classes to find out what we've got coming up next. Isabel, what do we have coming up next?
Our next class will be next week, and it's our cooking class that we do with our partner, or not next week, the week after, September 28th. And that is terrific tacos. So 2 ways that you can eat tacos that are sure to spice up your taco night.
Yeah, so if you like tacos, and Isabel and I are teaching that together, aren't we, Isabel?
Yep, we are.
Yep. So my tacos, I already know, are going to be fish tacos from the air fryer. I don't know what Isabel's are going to be, but we'll see. So if you're interested in some new tacos, they won't be just plain old ground beef tacos, because we know most people can make those, and they can also buy them at Taco Bell. So there'll be something different. And if you want to sign up for that class, they're Wednesdays at 2 o'clock, usually the cooking classes, and we hope to see you there. Thanks, everyone.
And then to answer your question, Deb, if we have recordings of some of our other programs, yes, all of our cooking classes are recorded because our partnership is through the Campus for Creative Aging. And so they do all the recordings. So if you come to one of those classes or cannot make it to one of those classes, send us an email and we can send you the link to that video platform.
And to that person, we are looking into recording these classes, which are not the cooking classes, and posting them on a Bronson YouTube page. We just haven't started doing it yet. So that's in the works. And thanks, everyone. So good to see and hear from all of you. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was very informative.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.